My name is Olivia Carter. If someone had told me that my grandfather's funeral would be the day my life changed forever, I probably would not have believed them, because that morning, I was still the granddaughter my entire family saw as a failure. And by the end of the day, I had become the only person carrying a secret none of them could have imagined. The church bells rang slowly beneath the cold, gray skies of Charleston. The pews were nearly full. Friends, business partners, distant relatives. They had all come to say goodbye to Henry Carter. The man who had built the fortune the Carter family never stopped talking about with pride. But the truth was that very few people in that room were genuinely grieving. The sadness lasted only until the service ended. After that, the looks began to change. Whispers started to spread, and calculations began forming in everyone's minds. Robert Carter stood by the window holding a glass of water. He was Henry's eldest son. Naturally, he believed most of the estate would belong to him. Beside him, Diane Carter was deep in conversation with the family attorney about properties she believed should have been transferred to her years ago. Across the room, Madison Carter laughed and chatted with a group of friends. She did not even bother hiding her excitement. In Madison's eyes, the funeral was simply a formality that needed to be completed before a wealthier chapter of life could begin. And Olivia? She sat quietly in the last row. No one approached her. No one asked if she was doing okay. That did not surprise her, because in the Carter family, Olivia had always been invisible. Years earlier, when her mother passed away after a long illness, everything changed. Her father left the city. Olivia had to figure out life on her own. While her cousins received financial support, business investments, and even homes from the family, Olivia chose to work in a small library. The salary was modest. The life was ordinary. No luxury cars, no mansions, no extravagant parties. And that was exactly why she had become an easy target for ridicule. Madison was the first to approach her. She glanced at Olivia's simple black dress and laughed. "Still working at the library?" Olivia nodded softly. Madison shrugged. "Well, that's not so bad. At least after today, you won't have to worry about money anymore." Several people nearby laughed along. One relative joked, "Maybe Olivia has been quietly winning Grandpa over for years. Who knows, maybe she'll walk away with a huge inheritance." Laughter echoed through the room again. Madison crossed her arms. "If that's true, it would be the most patient treasure hunt I've ever seen." Olivia did not respond. She had heard comments like that far too many times. But from across the room, someone was quietly watching everything. It was Jonathan Pierce, Henry Carter's personal attorney for more than 20 years. He said nothing. He simply observed every expression in the room, because he knew something no one else knew. Something Henry Carter had spent the final year of his life preparing. That afternoon, as the guests slowly left, the family gathered in the garden behind the estate. The conversations shifted quickly from grief to inheritance. Robert believed the family company should be handed over to him. Diane insisted the beachfront house belonged to her. Madison spoke endlessly about her future investment plans. No one mentioned Henry. No one mentioned what he would have wanted. And no one noticed that Olivia was remembering something else entirely. About a year earlier, Henry had started inviting her to dinner once a month, not to talk about money, not to discuss the estate. Instead, he asked unusual questions. If a person has everything but loses their honesty, what do they really have left? Do you think family is a responsibility or a privilege? If one day everyone turned their back on you, what would you do? At the time, Olivia assumed he was simply growing older and wanted someone to talk to. Looking back now, it felt as though he had been searching for something, or perhaps verifying something. As the sun began to set, Jonathan Pierce stepped into the center of the garden. Every conversation stopped immediately. He held a black folder in his hands. According to Henry Carter's instructions, the reading of the will will take place in 3 weeks. Several faces lit up with anticipation. But Jonathan was not finished. He looked around at everyone. Then he continued slowly. Before the will is read, there is a personal letter from Henry Carter. And according to his instructions, that letter must be read to the entire family first. A strange silence settled over the garden. Robert frowned. Diane looked toward Madison. No one understood why a letter would be important enough to be read before the will itself. Only Jonathan knew. Because inside the envelope locked away in his office safe were words powerful enough to change the lives of everyone in the Carter family. And 3 weeks later, not a single person would walk out of that room as the same person who walked in. 3 weeks later, the offices of Pierce and Associates were more crowded than anyone had expected. Not because the Carter family was particularly large, but because almost everyone believed that today would be the day they became wealthier. Olivia was the last to enter the conference room. She chose a chair at the corner of the table, just as she had always existed within this family. Quiet, overlooked, and often forgotten. Robert sat at the center of the table. Diane checked her phone repeatedly. Madison wore an expensive outfit and spent her time laughing and chatting with relatives around her. The atmosphere felt more like a shareholders' meeting than the reading of a will for a man who had recently passed away. Jonathan Pierce entered precisely on time. He placed a yellow envelope on the table. Immediately, every eye in the room turned toward it. Jonathan slowly removed his glasses. According to Henry Carter's instructions, I am required to read this letter before revealing the contents of the will. Robert let out a sigh. Do we really have to do this? Jonathan looked at him. It was my client's final request, and I intend to honor it. The room fell silent. Jonathan opened the letter. His voice rang out clearly. If you are hearing these words, it means I am no longer here to speak the truth myself. But the truth still needs to be told. From the very first lines, the atmosphere in the room changed. The smile slowly disappeared from Madison's face. Henry wrote that during the final year of his life, he had quietly observed every member of the family. Not to measure their ability to make money, but to measure their character. Jonathan continued reading. I realized that far too many people cared more about what I owned than who I was. Robert shifted uneasily in his chair. Diane began to frown. Jonathan's voice remained steady. Some people claimed they visited me every week. In reality, they only appeared when they needed a signature or a loan. Some people proudly described themselves as devoted to family, yet they quietly placed their own interests above everything else. Whispers began spreading through the room. No one knew exactly who Henry was referring to, until Jonathan reached the next section. Robert. The room instantly fell silent. Robert lifted his head. I know about the money you withdrew from the family trust 2 years ago. I know you never fully repaid it as you claimed. The color drained from Robert's face. That was business. He didn't understand the full situation. Jonathan showed no reaction. He simply continued, Diane, I know about the financial support you received from elderly relatives through stories that were greatly exaggerated. Diane immediately stood up. That's ridiculous. Someone filled his head with lies. No one responded. Jonathan kept reading. Madison, if you are sitting in this room today, remember that I know about the documents you signed on behalf of others to secure approval for a bank loan. This time, Madison was no longer smiling. The entire room became suffocatingly quiet. One secret after another was dragged into the light. One mask after another began to crack. Then Jonathan turned to the final page. His voice softened. There is one person in this family who never asked me for money, never demanded anything from me. The only person who visited me simply to ask how I was doing. Olivia felt her heart begin to pound. She had a feeling something was about to happen. Jonathan continued. Olivia never knew this. But many years ago, after her mother passed away, I was the one who quietly paid her college tuition. I never told her because I wanted to see what kind of person she would become without knowing she was being helped. Olivia froze. Memories flooded back without warning. The mysterious scholarships, the financial assistance that always seemed to arrive at exactly the right moment. The times she believed she had simply been lucky. The truth was that her grandfather had been behind it all. Her eyes burned with emotion, not because of the money, but because for the first time, she realized she had never truly been abandoned the way she once believed. Meanwhile, the others were beginning to lose their composure. Madison slammed her hand onto the table. This is ridiculous. Is he trying to turn Olivia into some kind of hero? Diane immediately joined in. Exactly. How do we even know any of this is true? Robert looked toward Olivia. His expression had changed. For the first time, there was uncertainty in his eyes. The unsettling suspicion that Henry may have prepared something far bigger than anyone had imagined. Jonathan folded the letter and set it aside. No one spoke. The atmosphere was so heavy that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafening. After several seconds of silence, Jonathan reached for another folder. This is the official will. Everyone immediately held their breath. Robert clenched his fists. Diane sat up straighter. Madison stared intensely at the documents. Everyone believed the most important moment had finally arrived. Jonathan opened the first page. His eyes moved across the opening line. Then he looked up at the room. I will begin with the first heir specifically mentioned by Henry Carter. He paused, only for a second, but it was enough to make everyone tense. Then he read the name aloud. Olivia Carter. The room seemed to freeze. And for the first time in her life, every pair of eyes in the Carter family was focused on the woman they had always treated as invisible. No one in the room reacted immediately. The name Olivia Carter seemed to hang in the air like something impossible to believe. Madison was the first to break the silence. No way. She let out an awkward laugh. It's probably just some kind of keepsake, a photo album, or an old watch collection. A few people nodded slightly. That explanation sounded far more reasonable than Olivia becoming the primary heir, but Jonathan Pierce did not smile. He turned to the next page. According to the wishes of Henry Carter, full ownership of the Ashley River property will be transferred to Olivia Carter. The smile instantly vanished from Madison's face. Robert snapped his head up. Diane blinked repeatedly as though she had misheard. The Ashley River property was no ordinary piece of land. It was the most valuable asset Henry had ever owned. Not only did it include the family estate, it also contained dozens of acres of undeveloped commercial land. Robert immediately rose from his seat. There has to be some mistake. Jonathan calmly shook his head. No, all documents have been legally verified. But the shock was far from over. Jonathan continued reading. 35% of the shares in Carter Maritime Holdings will be transferred to Olivia Carter. This time, the room truly exploded. Robert slammed his hand onto the table. Impossible. I've been running that company for 10 years. Those shares should belong to me. Jonathan looked directly at him. Henry Carter disagreed. Robert's face turned red with anger. Across the table, Diane was struggling to stay composed as well. What about me? Jonathan turned another page. Diane Carter will receive a fixed monetary amount as specified in the will. That is all. Diane went silent. The amount was far smaller than anything she had ever imagined. By now, Madison was completely losing control. And me? I'm his biological granddaughter. What do I get? Jonathan looked down at the documents. A pocket watch that personally belonged to Henry Carter. The room nearly erupted. Madison jumped to her feet. A pocket watch? He left me a pocket watch? And Olivia gets everything? No one answered. Because they did not understand it either. For years, Olivia had been the least noticed member of the family. No one ever imagined she would become the center of the entire will. Olivia remained seated. The truth was that she was stunned herself. She had never expected anything. She certainly never imagined her grandfather would leave her such an enormous inheritance. Then Jonathan reached for another letter. According to Henry's instructions, this section must be read publicly. The room fell silent once again. Jonathan's voice echoed through the room. If you are wondering why Olivia received the majority of my estate, the answer is very simple. I did not leave my assets to the person who needed money the most. I left them to the person who deserved them the most. Robert looked away with visible contempt. Jonathan continued. For many years, Olivia never asked me to buy her a house. She never requested money to start a business. She never asked about her inheritance. Meanwhile, the people who spoke most often about family were usually the ones asking me about money. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy. Every sentence felt like an indictment. But what made everyone most uncomfortable was the fact that they could not argue with it. Because deep down, they knew Henry was telling the truth. The meeting ended in complete chaos. Robert left first. Diane was furious. Madison was crying while calling her friends. Meanwhile, Olivia quietly returned to her grandfather's old estate. For the first time in years, the place felt strangely empty. She walked through the familiar study. The room still carried the scent of oak wood and the old books Henry loved. While sorting through a few personal belongings, Olivia accidentally discovered a hidden drawer behind one of the bookshelves. She froze. She had never seen this drawer before. Inside was a brown document box. Henry Carter's name was written across the front. Olivia opened it. Thick stacks of documents filled the box. At first, she assumed they were ordinary financial records, but only minutes later, her expression began to change. Because what she found inside was not wealth. It was secrets, contracts, signatures, internal reports. Every document was connected to Robert, Diane, and Madison. The more she read, the colder she felt. Her grandfather had not merely observed the family during the final year of his life. He had quietly investigated them, and it appeared he had uncovered things far more serious than anything revealed in the letter. Then suddenly, a black envelope slipped from the bottom of the box. There was only a single line written across the front. For Olivia. Open only if the family begins challenging the will. Olivia felt her heart pound, because she knew that was almost certainly going to happen. And something deep inside told her that whatever was hidden inside that envelope had the power to destroy the image the Carter family had spent decades building. She stared at it in silence. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, Robert was already calling attorneys. Diane was contacting her private accountant, and Madison had begun posting cryptic messages across social media. The real battle had only just begun. 3 days after discovering the black envelope hidden inside her grandfather's study, Olivia finally understood why Henry Carter had kept it secret until the very end. Because what was inside was not merely enough to protect the will. It was powerful enough to destroy the entire empire the Carter family had built on lies. That morning, Jonathan Pierce's office received an official lawsuit from Robert Carter. He was asking the court to review the legality of the will. Diane immediately joined the challenge. Madison stood beside them as well. In their eyes, this was no longer a family matter. It was a battle for money, and they believed Olivia would never be capable of fighting back. But they had underestimated the one person Henry Carter had truly trusted. That afternoon, Olivia arrived at the law office carrying the box of documents she had discovered in the study. Jonathan opened the files one by one. At first, he maintained his usual calm expression, but the more he read, the more his face changed. Finally, he looked up. Henry prepared everything. Olivia nodded quietly. Inside the files were detailed pieces of evidence, hidden financial transactions, contracts signed without proper authority, transfers of money that had never been reported, and most serious of all, documents proving that Robert had once attempted to secretly sell part of the family trust property to cover losses from one of his own failed investments. No one, except Henry, had known about it. Until now. Jonathan closed the file. If these documents are presented in court, they won't just lose the case. They could face a financial investigation. For the first time since her grandfather's death, Olivia felt that she truly understood him. He had not left behind wealth simply to pass on money. He had left behind the truth, and he had known exactly when that truth needed to be revealed. 2 weeks later, the official hearing began. Robert entered the courtroom with his usual confidence. Diane spent her time whispering with her attorney. Madison sat in the back row with anger burning in her eyes. Meanwhile, Olivia arrived alone. No grand entrance, no speeches, no attempt to gain sympathy. She brought only the truth. As the evidence was presented piece by piece, the atmosphere inside the courtroom began to shift. The confidence slowly faded from Robert's face. His firm answers became hesitant. Excuses began to replace certainty. Then it was time for the black envelope. Jonathan rose from his seat. According to Henry Carter's instructions, this document is to be revealed only if the will is challenged. He opened the file. Page after page was presented before the court. Signatures, internal memorandums, financial reports. Every document confirmed the suspicions Henry had carried for years. Silence settled over the courtroom. Even Robert's attorney stopped arguing. Because there was nothing left to argue, everything had been documented, accurately, legally, and beyond dispute. When the hearing finally ended, the judge upheld the will in its entirety. Every challenge was dismissed. In that moment, the battle officially came to an end. Robert left the courtroom without saying a word. Diane lowered her head and followed behind him. Madison no longer had enough confidence to look anyone in the eye. The people who had once mocked Olivia had nothing left to say, because for the first time in many years they were being forced to face the consequences of their own choices. But the greatest surprise came from Olivia herself. She did not celebrate. She did not mock them. She did not seek revenge. Several months later, development work began on the Ashley River property. Instead of selling it for a quick profit, Olivia established a scholarship foundation in Henry Carter's name. Part of the estate was used to support students who had lost their parents or were facing difficult circumstances. The community library where she had once worked also received significant funding. Many people could not understand it. After everything her family had done to her, why would she still choose to help others? But Olivia understood, because her grandfather had taught her the most important lesson long before any of this happened. Money can reveal a person's true nature, but the way we choose to use it is what truly defines who we are. One autumn evening, Olivia returned to the old estate. The sun was slowly setting beyond the river. Everything felt unusually peaceful. She stepped into the study, the room that had once held the secrets that changed her life. An old photograph of Henry Carter still rested on the wooden desk. Olivia gently picked it up. For the first time in months, she smiled. Not because she had won, not because of the inheritance, but because she finally understood the real gift he had left behind. It was not the land, not the company shares, not the bank accounts. The greatest gift was the opportunity to see the truth, to see the true nature of the people around her, and more importantly, to see her own worth, because the woman her entire family had once treated as invisible had become the only person strong enough to protect everything Henry Carter had spent his lifetime building. And sometimes, that is the most valuable inheritance of all. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money, property, or power. Sometimes it's the truth that sets you free and reveals who people really are. Olivia lost the family she thought she had, but in the process, she found her own strength, her own worth, and a future built on honesty instead of entitlement. What would you have done if you were in Olivia's place? Would you have forgiven your family or walked away for good? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy family drama stories filled with hidden truths, inheritance conflicts, and powerful karma moments, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable stories.